Hello, everyone, and welcome to Introducing Onshape into Your Organization. My name is Taylor Lockwood-Kane, and I am the Strategy Director here at Onshape. I've been with PTC for over 7 years and officially joined the Onshape team back in October. In my role, I help oversee strategic relationships and strategic implementation across the operations organization, including helping to support our customer success, tech pre-sales, and technical teams. And it is my pleasure to be your moderator for today's event. I'm happy to have you joining me and a few of our fantastic customers in our discussion. I'll have each of them introduce themselves individually here momentarily, but ahead of that, I wanted to remind everyone of the goal of today's session. And we scheduled a session to help you accelerate the introduction of Onshape into your organization. For that reason, I want to encourage all of you to leverage the Q&A and ask as many questions as make sense to help you flesh out your understanding of this topic. With that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Malika, who will be moderating the Q&A and helping to relay those questions in real time. And I'll do my best to ensure that we answer those questions and have our great panel answer those questions for you as we go through. And with that, I would like to begin by introducing our panelists. Our first panelist is Julian Bell. Julian, if you don't mind, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Taylor. Hey, folks, my name is Julian Bell. I'm an R&D manager with the UPS Advanced Technology Group. Advanced Technology Group, or ATG, is the foremost R&D organization within UPS. We're tasked with looking 5, 10, 15 years out in the future to see what technologies we can bring into UPS to help us modernize our operations. Within ATG, I direct our rapid prototyping laboratory, kind of mechanical engineering subject center of excellence that supports efforts across the ATG team. I've been a very long-term Onshape user, I've beta tested for Onshape back in the day. I'm a professional user in my personal work, but we just recently managed to bring UPS into the Onshape fold. We're super excited within my group to have access to these tools, and we learned a lot of valuable lessons in the process. So I'm excited to hopefully share some useful tips that we picked up along the way about how to bring big organizations to this software.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Julian. And I know as a longtime Onshape user, we're going to learn a lot from you today. Great. Next up is Romeo. Romeo, when you're ready.
Hi there. I am a technology director at JABIL Packaging Solutions, which is a part of JABIL Circuit, a very large global contract manufacturing company. Where I worked before, Ecologic Brands was acquired by JABIL just recently. Within the last year, we make sustainable packaging and trying to reduce the use of plastic. I've been using CAD for a long time, and like Julian, was involved in using Onshape from the very early days. It's been a super interesting platform to be part of, and I've had some experience introducing it in 2 or 3 different kinds of locations and different kinds of companies as I moved from a consultancy to a startup to through this acquisition. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation today.
Thanks so much, Romeo. And again, learning about scaling that implementation will be a key part of today's discussion. So looking forward to hearing from you. Great. Josh, as you're ready.
Thanks, Taylor. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Josh BITNER. I work for Premier Custom Built. We are a ultra high-end custom cabinetry company. We often like to refer to ourselves as more of a millwork company. We work with high-end interior designers, architects, and kitchen designers all across the country and try to bring their beautiful projects to life for their clients. We tend to have a trouble to say no to any type of project. That really describes our company, where we will take any type of project or design that involves any level of engineering and take it under our wing. My title, I'm a project manager, so I work directly with those designers to help engineer their products, draw their products, and get them ready for our manufacturing plant. And that's really where Onshape is coming well for us, where we have been able to highly use feature script and create custom configurations and custom features in order to tailor our workflow and our processes. I've been a user of Onshape similar to Julian since the very beginning. Our company has been also using it for the last 6-ish years. So we're very heavily invested in this point and looking forward to sharing our experience with everyone today.
Thanks so much, Josh. And last but not least, Elias. Elias, as you're ready.
Thank you, Taylor. Well, my name is Elias Gallegos, and I'm working in Question Group, specifically in a new business unit called Question Mobility, where we basically work with all the ecosystem in mobility. But we are currently working very closely in the conversion of diesel trucks to electric trucks. This is currently one thing I'm very involved with. My current job is a lead control systems engineer, but when I started working with Onshape, which was last year, I was a lead design engineer. So we are newcomers basically to this platform, and we are very interested. We have worked so much to make this happen. We have implemented processes, and we're happy to be here to share our experience in implementing the Onshape in longer or bigger organizations.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Elias. As you all can see, we have a really diverse group of panelists today with a plethora of experience with Onshape, and really excited to get into the discussion today. So with that, let's get into it. So something that stood out to me as you were all speaking was you kind of talked about 3 common themes across your implementation. That was overcoming organizational inertia, getting leadership on board, and getting the end users on the platform. How you went about tackling those challenges was unique to each of you. And with that, I'd love to get in and kind of pick your brains a little bit further in each of those 3 categories. Julian, why don't we start with you, if that's okay? So again, you're a longtime user of Onshape. I've heard stories from John Hershik about how valuable your feedback was all the way back in 2015 as you were getting started with the product. And now you find yourself at UPS doing a large scale implementation, which is really impressive. Tell us what your experience has been like when trying to overcome some of that organizational inertia that exists at a large company.
Yeah, absolutely. So the interesting thing about implementing at UPS is my group, the Advanced Technology Group, is this tiny, tiny team within a 500,000 person company. So previous companies I'd worked for, we talked about, hey, can we use Onshape for a variety of reasons, usually related to existing commitments to other software that people weren't interested in. It never worked out. But finally here, we were in an environment where, one, there wasn't a good alternative. At UPS, writ broadly, the primary CAD system of choice is AutoCAD, because most engineering work at UPS is facility scale engineering, not product scale engineering like my team does. So there wasn't an existing alternative. Onshape's a uniquely well-suited tool for our group's particular needs. And because of the size of our team and because of the expertise, the kind of excitement of my teammates, there was a lot of internal buy-in. The primary issue we ran into was explaining to the larger organization what we wanted to do and why we wanted to do it. When UPS thinks about purchasing something, we're thinking about a very different type of purchase. This could be 7 to 9 figures. This could be a purchase that could take place over years, if not decades, with very high uptime requirements, and generally for like large and complex equipment, right? Large conveyor systems, entire buildings. Explaining to the organization, hey, we want to buy this very cutting edge software for this very small team to do something that isn't done anywhere else at the company, was really a challenge of explanation. And so things that I found helpful for performing that explanation, one, figuring out what the process looked like up front. UPS has a well-documented, or has a well-established procurement tool chain. It's an entire division of the company. But figuring out how purchasing something like Onshape, how bringing it into our organization migrated through our procurement process was totally opaque to me when I started out. The same also held true actually for migrating through our IT process as well. So one of the most valuable things I did was I identified people within the organization at UPS already who had done this for either similar SaaS products or for CAD products in the past, or CAD adjacent products in the past, and got their input, got their guidance early on. They were able to tell me two things. One, what the process looks like, and two, what parts of the process I could circumvent potentially because our purchase was so small. For instance, we didn't need to go through certain parts of the process that a much larger purchase might have, or which parts were going to be really, really difficult for us. For instance, some of the IT compliance stuff. So that was really, really important early on, was to find those people, have them help me understand the process and help me understand how I could optimize the process, either by avoiding parts of the process that I didn't really need to do, or by focusing my energies on the process, on those parts of the process that I really was going to have to do, and we're going to post challenges for this particular acquisition or this particular goal at this particular company.
That's wonderful. And maybe you can expand a little bit. Did you have any initial skepticism about getting the product introduced, or were you able to get people on board relatively quickly?
So yes, when I started at UPS in late 2019, not long after I arrived, I reached out to someone who I knew at Onshape in marketing and sales, and said, "Hey, we'd love to set this up." They sent me one of the first kind of IT review forms, and the process stalled. I just didn't have time to go through what turned out being almost a year of work. Not because of the Onshape's teams, not because of Onshape, but because of what UPS requires to onboard a SaaS product. I didn't have time to go through that year of work at that point. I needed something else that I could get making parts in quickly without having to go through this long process. So it didn't work the first time I tried. But after a year of trying to support a different CAD system with users all over the globe, some of whom are expert CAD users, some of whom are total novices and are trying to pick this up for the first time, I came back to Onshape, and I realized, like, no, that we have to do this. Even if it takes a year, it's going to pay off for us in hours I don't spend, fixing PDM issues. And so knowing that ahead of time, knowing just how valuable this was going to be for me, for my team, for the organization, that was important to have that kind of goal ahead. In terms of convincing my local team, there were really no challenges. I mean, I'd shown folks internally what Onshape could enable them to do. And we're in kind of an interesting situation here in that we have users from all different backgrounds. We have mechanical engineers like myself, but we have robotics engineers, we have data scientists, we have systems engineers, we have building architects, essentially. We have finance folks, all of whom in one way or another have found a need for CAD tools. I remember one of my favorite examples is working with one of our data scientists to create a model of a sensor system that they were working on to present to our C-suite, right? Showing them, hey, we can help you put together a really compelling visualization of this awesome thing you've been working on in this package. Turn on the light for that team. It's like, okay, we need access to this. This is a valuable tool for us, even though it's not part of our core function. And they've actually extended that to become CAD experts who are actually building their own parts and supporting their own experimental work in our shop using Onshape, which is really exciting. So anyways, no real hesitation internally. Our advanced technology folks are really excited about getting access to these kinds of tools. More than anything, it was explaining to the organization what this was, why we needed it, why it was different than anything else they'd ever seen before, and kind of slowly moving through the process that was laid out to get Onshape on board.
That's wonderful. Well, as someone who leads the procurement effort here at Onshape, I can attest to how complicated that can be, and would speak on behalf of the team and saying thank you for navigating all of those processes internally. It's great to hear that you've scaled your use of Onshape and CAD, not only in your department, but in other departments across UPS. Great. We'll move on to our next question. Romeo, this is for you. To the best of my understanding, I believe you had a similar experience with security needs and questions at your organization. Tell us about your experience learning what those needs were and how you approached Onshape for help. And Romeo, I'm very sorry, you're muted. If you could unmute yourself, and if you don't mind starting over for us, that would be great.
I'm sorry. Yeah, on the IT security and compliance side, that was something that came up shortly after the startup that I worked for was acquired by JABIL. Essentially, we had been using Onshape as our primary CAD for a few years before this acquisition happened, and then essentially the challenge was, or the what we needed to navigate was, can we, as the startup that's being brought into this larger organization, can we continue to use the tools that we're using? Because JABIL hadn't been an Onshape using company. They're a large Creo customer, but not an Onshape customer. So for after some period of time, it became clear to everyone that it was likely we were going to be able to continue using Onshape. There was value there, and so it was really with help from my sales support folks at Onshape. We got that same IT form that Julian was talking about, and once I connected with the right people inside of JABIL, it was actually pretty seamless. I think that JABIL's processes are similarly complex and large, but they were also quite well situated to be able to understand what Onshape required and what it offered and what the security issues were, and we're able to accept it pretty easily.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. And happy to hear again that Onshape and our sales team was a great resource to you.
Absolutely.
Julian, would love to have you on.
I just wanted to jump in on that because Romeo reminded me of something when he said getting help from the Onshape sales team. That was one of my biggest takeaways, was lean on the sales folks at Onshape. Mm-hmm. My sales contact, Ben Malika, I think is the reason why there's Onshape at UPS today. Ben, like I told Ben, I have a sieve for a brain. As soon as I look at something else, I'm going to forget that I need to get you this document. Please keep on top of me. Ben did that. Yeah. He helped me negotiate agreements between both sides. He helped me understand what the process looked like on Onshape's side. You know, the Onshape sales team is there to make money by selling you product. Take advantage of their services. They were absolutely essential to our acquisition. And I think they can really help other folks as well.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Great. We'll move on to the next question. So we've talked a lot about some of the difficulties in navigating implementation or initial purchase, but I'm sure there's also the challenge for many of getting leadership on board. Elias, I know you put a lot of effort into getting your particular leadership team on board. From what I understand, you even created a total cost of ownership evaluation for your team. Tell us what it took to put this evaluation together and why it was so important to your organization to have something like this.
Yes, of course. You know, this TCO formulation actually was one of the end phases of the whole implementation. At some point in time, I just realized I had all this information that it was important to consider it for one question that was inquired by the top leaders, right? But I think, and I want to redirect this question a little bit more about answering the right questions, because basically that's what our experience was. Our experience is also related to that one, to a startup, to the one that a startup has. We are relatively new into the market. We started using the name Question Mobility just last year, but we have been working with this for years. So 3 years ago, basically we realized we were gonna grow because mobility was growing at such a fast pace that we had to do something. And that's when the first question basically came out, and we tried to find a better way to do things, not the classic way, right? So it's through all these many questions that we arrived to this question of how much does it cost? But it's such a simple question, right? But there is so much things in the background. It's also about evaluating something that is totally new for the organization. Question Mobility is part of a big manufacturing group. So they are very knowledgeable about CAD systems. They have most of them, you name it. So the only difference is that this new system was different. It was different to explain. It was something in the cloud. It was something that didn't have any files. It was something that was being costed differently. Before arriving to that table, we had to realize how the classic system worked. We have to realize what we wanted to do. We have to put all the right people, IT, the people from engineering, corporate level, business unit level, our directors, everybody. Right at the end, we had all this information that basically was just an addition of things and considerations, but all the efforts and questions that needed to be answered, I think those are the ones, if there's a chance during this talk, I would like to mention anytime I could. So yes, I encourage anybody who is trying to implement any system to try to formulate some kind of evaluation or to be able to compare other systems also, and that you give also your top leaders a good information so that they can also be sure about the decision that they make.
Great. And Elias, you brought up a really interesting idea, which is that the company that you work for already had access to other CAD systems. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you positioned Onshape as unique to those other CAD products and why you needed that. Right.
Of course. And I'll go back again to the first question. I think it was related to, is there a better way to do things? I had experience before in other companies with my company's kind of software. It was also about my bad experiences with this kind of system as a designer. So I kind of knew that what was the process or what was inside the mind of the designer when working with this, right? You're working with such big assemblies, you're working with such amounts of information that not necessarily a CAD system is the one that can manage all that information. You know, all that waiting in front of a computer for things to refresh. Basically, I was already knowledgeable about it. When I saw the chance to get rid of all that thing, when I met Onshape, when I started to know what was Onshape, that was the second question. Basically, that one of the key points, what is Onshape? I realized that we could make a big change inside the company because it was something that was going to allow us to collaborate, that was going to allow us to be faster. And I will say that will allow us to have information with greater quality.
That's great. So first, wonderful to hear that you were aware of some of the great benefits of Onshape, but were able to position those with your leadership team and help them understand why those are so important to you as a designer. Appreciate the insights. This next question is for you, Josh. So Josh, it's my understanding, similar to Ilias, that you guys already had your leadership bought into 3D designing and CAD generally. But I also understand you had to introduce Onshape into the picture. A question I'm sure the audience is wondering is, how do you get users who already have a set workflow to adopt a new workflow or a new system?
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. So I wish I had a golden bullet answer for you on this one, but unfortunately there's not. Yeah, so our situation was a bit unique, where the decision was really a top-down decision, where our president had decided 3D is the way we want to go. Just a little background information: we had been using, long before I'd been at the company, we're a Mac-based company, so we used a program called Vectorworks for the last 20 or so years. So a strictly 2D CAD system, traditional drawing, no data associated, just lines on a piece of paper to try to communicate our drawings and designs to the production team. So our leadership, our president, recognized as we are continually developing and incorporating designs that are highly complex, highly custom, we needed to take the next step to 3D. And pretty quickly after that was discovered, Onshape came in, and it was decided we wanted to move that way. So then, kind of answering your question, it was not an easy thing, to be honest. Where we are, our physical location, I don't know if anyone's familiar with where we're at, kind of the Pennsylvania Dutch location. There's definitely a deep heritage, a deep root of product and mastering of skill, and what comes with that is how we do things, and change is not easy. So trying to implement a new system involved a lot of just really effort by a team that we basically created a small, highly skilled, highly capable team who came in, and especially from the beginning, because we worked with Onshape from the very beginning, we were able to curate basically our own workflow, as I mentioned earlier, with custom features and high use of feature script. We were able to kind of create that and have a constant feedback loop with this small team. We met once a week for about 2 to 3 hours each week. We would work on this R&D, we would try to implement it, get feedback, and continually go on this cycle until we basically got to a point where we were able to produce projects with this small team to a capability where the rest of the team actually recognized, oh wow, here's a new system that can do so much more than what we're used to before. We can have metadata tied to all these parts. We can do automated part generation. We can send this out to our CNC. We can list things that we had to spend hours doing by hand before, where now we can just click a button through the API interface. So there's so much involved with that once those wheels started turning, kind of almost a domino effect started happening. And now we've been implemented, and we're the wheels are turning, and people are really almost pulling for more and more and more from Onshape. So as these new releases come out, we're excited to continue to develop and add more to our capabilities.
That's wonderful. I have a follow-on question, but before I do so, I just want to remind the audience, myself along with the panelists are here to answer any questions you have. So feel free to include those in the chat if you have any up to this point. And with that, Josh, I'm interested, when working with new CAD users, how do you help them get comfortable with this new system? You talked about bringing people in to the environment and showing them some of the unique capabilities such as feature script, and maybe you could tag on, add a little color for us.
Sure. Yeah, so we have a little bit of a range of experience with our users. I myself, coming up through school, had some 3D experience, was fairly comfortable with it. So it was a very easy transition from, say, SolidWorks into Onshape. And there were one or two others who were in a similar situation, but the most of our users were, again, used to 2D CAD. So it was a little bit of a learning curve there. The way that we implemented it was to have some use of the Learning Center. That's a great resource that Onshape provides, and that continues to grow. But we actually, on top of that, we kind of custom curated our own training regimen, where back when I talked about our initial team that was created, we had a kind of an early introduction of training for everyone. It was about a half hour per week. Once a week, we would have a dedicated time split throughout the week where we would just start introducing them to 3D modeling. And eventually, as they got used to 3D modeling, using the tools, being familiar with that type of environment, then we started introducing them to our custom workflow. Again, one of the great things about Onshape is just the customization. And again, I keep mentioning feature script, but we have a high number of custom features that really makes our workflow very unique to what we like to do and what our process is. So that within itself was a high learning curve for our users. And that was, again, on top of learning the 3D program and switching from 2D to 3D. So we really use that training time to help them out. And now actually a new recent thing that we've done is we create what we call a newsletter. We call it an NDS newsletter that we create once every other week, a bi-weekly newsletter with little tips and tricks, a little kind of training regimen, and any new feature updates or things that Onshape introduces or we might introduce internally. And we get together every other week to discuss it as a team and go over any questions anybody might have as people are still learning a program. And it's just a great way to bring everyone together and we can learn as a team.
It's pretty incredible, Josh. And I think it's really cool to hear a multifaceted approach like what you took, taking time to go through the Learning Center, bringing people together to go through that training. And then the newsletter in particular, I think is unique. Would love, it sounds like maybe Julian and Romeo have a little bit to add. So I'll pass it off first to you, Romeo, and then you, Julian.
Sure. One of the other, in my situation, I was working with experienced CAD users from other platforms, and it's always a challenge to change to new platforms, as we know. But in my case, it wasn't introducing people to 3D as a way of working, but it was trying to move them to a new way of working with 3D stuff. One of the tools that Onshape offers that was really helpful was Bootcamp. That's a 4 days, a few hours a day of training, specifically targeted for CAD users who are already CAD users. They may have some level of expertise or a high level of expertise in another CAD system. And this training offers insight into how to do the things you may be familiar with in your own platform, how to do those things in Onshape. Some of the unique things about Onshape in terms of workflow, working with documents in tabs instead of files, etc. And then the other piece of training that Onshape was really helpful with was training on how to for light Onshape users. So one of the great things about moving to JABIL is that we have several users who are designers and who design parts and have full seats of Onshape. And then there are others who are either program managers within our company, and those users also got to take some training from Onshape, specifically tailored towards light users. What's fantastic is now lots more stakeholders. Julian talked about this a little bit, different kinds of users. And in our case, we have a similar situation. We have program managers who are able to go and if I do a release using release management, I can make sure that my program manager is notified and they can do the next steps with those files. Those are super helpful ways to get existing CAD users over into Onshape. Julian?
Yeah, thanks, Romeo. So I hope someday soon to be where Josh is with his program, and where Romeo is, using light users to notify senior management. Hey, look what we've built today. We're much earlier in our rollout, so we have a lot to learn from these guys. The one thing I'd add on to this, particularly when working with users who are not experienced 3D CAD users, but want to build out the skill set, is the value of helping them find a well-contained, tractable project to work on that will show real results. And this can be a toy project. This can be, hey, make a widget and let's 3D print it. But ideally, it's something that's actually relevant to their work at that moment. And a good example from our past work recently is a robotics engineer on our team who was working with one of my mechanical engineers setting up a camera system. The mechanical engineer walked the robotics engineer through making a simple model to figure out where the field of view of this camera would be. And just that simple exercise in modeling, coupled with the real world impact on that robotics engineer's work, made it click for them. And then they're like, hey, we need a seed of this. Let's make sure we're signed up for this. So again, small, tractable projects that are going to deliver real value to the user. It's been really important for us.
That's wonderful advice, Julian. I really appreciate it. And we actually have our first question from the audience, I think. Romeo, this might be a great question for you, but happy to have anyone chime in. It says, what is the most useful resource for new users to Onshape? I know you touched on Bootcamp, but if there's anything else that comes to mind. And the second part of the question is, how fast would you say users were able to get as proficient in Onshape as their former tools?
Oh, that second part's an interesting one. I think the Learning Center, as been mentioned before, it's great because you can mess around with the different learning channels on your own time. The boot camps are really interesting for people who want to have some interaction with an instructor, because the boot camps are live programs. They happen at a certain time. You have to be available for them, but you do have an instructor and you can ask questions. So both of those are very useful. The forum is an amazing place to meet other users, get your questions asked, just watch other conversations happen. There are countless times where I see somebody ask a question and I go, oh, well, I know what I would do in that situation. And then the depth of the answers that come through, I'm always blown away by the amount of thought that users put into their answers and the different approaches. I was listening to a session earlier today on surfacing from Trek, and one of the things they talked about is there's many different ways to, there's not a single way to do the best model, and the forum is a really fantastic place to see that. The other incredible thing about the forum from a community standpoint is it's not just users, it's also Onshape folks, the developers, the support people. It's the same names you see on the forum that when you contact support and ask about a problem or something you think is a bug, those are the same people who are interacting on the forum. So that's a really fantastic place. Those are a couple examples.
That's wonderful. And any thoughts on that second part of the question? How fast would you say users were able to get proficient in Onshape?
Right. I've had a few different cases. I have one engineer who was a long-time SolidWorks user, and it didn't take her very long at all. Within, I would say, 2 months, she was really super proficient in Onshape. In our situation, there was a kind of a combination of, here's some existing products that we're working on with some workflows that had already been established, so that helps, which it always does in any CAD or design situation. But it's a really, with some expertise in CAD concepts generally, Onshape is very easy to pick up. I think if you're going from not having the CAD concepts or not working in 3D, it's going to be a little bit more challenging and it'll take a little bit longer. But it certainly doesn't take long for experienced users to see some value. Within a few weeks, there's always something where there's a real insight that turns people on.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And Julian, did you have a couple of things you wanted to add as well?
Yeah, two things I'd add on to what Romeo said, all of which I agree with. One, the support button is absolutely invaluable, specifically focusing on experienced users. I tell them, look, even if it's not a bug, even if it's a, hey, I think I should be able to do this way, but it's not working, it's breaking. It is fabulous to get an email from Lou Gallo, 2 hours later saying, okay, try this instead. Or, no, you found a bug, good job. That kind of direct responsiveness is amazing. The other thing that I found helpful as the kind of manager over the Onshape service within our group is, even though it takes time, having an open door policy for questions about using the software. I tell my experienced users who are coming from SolidWorks, coming from Fusion, et cetera, if you run into an issue, you've spent 5 minutes working on it, come ask me. The odds that I can answer the question for you in 30 seconds versus you spending 2 hours on the forums or looking at videos or in the Learning Center, et cetera, is substantial. And while those experiences are valuable and you should pursue them separately, I don't want to slow down your work. For instance, in assemblies, if I spend 5 minutes explaining how Onshape thinks about assemblies versus how other CAD systems think about assemblies, then the designer is so much better prepared to go into building their first assembly. It makes all the difference in their workflow. So that's been really helpful.
That's great feedback. And this has been a really dynamic discussion. We're already down to the last 5 minutes. So I'm going to get to one crucial question. It's also my understanding there have been a few additional questions in the chat we won't get to. I think I speak on behalf of the presenters when I say we'll answer those offline and happy to get back to you directly. So we'll capture those and I'll get some feedback from the panelists today. But want to pose a question to all of you in the last 5 minutes here. What would you tell those watching or looking to accelerate the introduction of Onshape into their organization? What would you give them in terms of advice or final thoughts?
Do it. Start the process. I mean, it really is a great way to do CAD work, and it has a ton of benefits, and it has a great place inside every organization. I think, even if, as we've all talked about, it has to exist alongside other stuff. Totally fine. It has a great place.
Yeah,
I would say. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with Romeo on that. I mean, one of the great things about Onshape is that the investment to really actually try the program out and see how this could work is so low. I mean, in comparison to your traditional waterfall approach with other programs, trying to install and get the right software and hardware, I mean, it's not even a comparison. So I really would recommend just trying it out. Even a free version, you can really see what some capabilities are. And once you're maybe ready to take the next step, we've really found that having a small team or having someone who can almost be a champion to kind of take the lead and be a resource, kind of like Julian was talking about too, someone who can be more of an expert or a champion, like I said, and others can go and resource them for advice or questions. Just start rowing down the river, and I think you guys will really find it exciting.
Right. I just wanted to add that it's true. It's actually worth it. From a person who actually make the numbers and analysis, and I had to kind of show the hard information. Yeah, try. That's the first one, but the second one, it'll make sense economically. Just as Josh said, it's just everything is so easy. You don't go through IT costs. You don't go through licensing costs. We are renewable schemes. All those things. Forget about it. It's just gonna be easier. It's gonna be more economic. You'll see.
Adding on to what Elias is saying, I think figuring out what's going to resonate with your organization, right? My organization saying, oh, I'm spending a lot of time configuring PDM, that doesn't really resonate. Saying we aren't going to need to replace laptops every 2 years because we need the latest hardware, that does resonate. So figuring out what's going to resonate with your organization, and then figuring out what the process to get through your organization looks like, understanding what you can avoid, what you have to do, what's going to be easy, what's going to be difficult. That's really helpful for actually moving the ball forward. And don't give up. It's the bigger your company is, the longer and harder the process is going to be, but it's absolutely worth it.
Right. Infrastructure
Definitely.
costs, also forget about
Yeah.
those.
Exactly.
Not
Exactly.
special, very difficult, special, expensive computers. Forget about
Yeah.
those.
Wonderful. Well, I want to conclude today's discussion by saying thank you to all of our panelists, Julian, Josh, Romeo, Elias. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been wonderful to hear from you. And I hope that I can speak on behalf of all of our guests today in saying that we learned a lot from all of you. That concludes today's session. Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thank you, Taylor.